also for your invitation. That well, I am in Jerusalem, and in my back, from more or less here, 300 meters, we can find the Calvary, which is the place that we're going to discuss what happened there, but according to the Quran. So, being here in Jerusalem, I am just sharing the presentation. Being in Jerusalem is a blessing because you have necessarily interaction with Muslims, Jews, and Christians. But I put the 3 books here in the beginning of the presentation, and I think it's well, I'm going to go directly to the point with this structure. So first, an introduction, summary of the explanations and interpretations, the ancient ones and some other more modern. Then 3 key grammatical issues about the only verse of the Quran that speaks about the crucifixion of Jesus. Then Jewish-Christian polemics in the background, especially in the second part of the same verse. And then other relevant Quranic verses, and then the conclusion. So as the introduction, I wanted to say that I think I have been seeing a growing interest in this topic in the past centuries, the 20th, 21st centuries. There has been articles talking about this, but in the past 15 years, 2 monographies on the specific topic and several articles has been published. One is of 2009 by Lawson, and the other by Oakes in 2020. The first one is more general about everything that has been said from the beginning to our days. Oakes is more specific about those that are compatible with the crucifixion of Jesus. And then this I put here, and the article that was the basis for the research that I will present today, that I published in Islamo-Christiana this past year. And there is a status question, is all the things I could find that has been said, but briefly. And then a new interpretation trying to go to the same words that we find in the verse. Another signal of the growing interest, perhaps, is that in this seminar we had a few weeks ago also the same topic by Dr. Imran Usmani, and well, the idea that he had is, let's say that we arrived to the same conclusion by another way. So in the introduction, I wanted to say just the context of this verse. This space here is the 3 verses of the Quran that says something about Jesus, but the context is not Jesus. The context is the Jews. In the 2 verses before, he described 6 sins of the Jews, starting with for their breaking the covenant, for their killing the prophets, but it doesn't finish. And after the 3 verses that refer to Jesus, it continues, and further, and adds 2 more sins. It's accusing the Jews of several sins, and then they will be punished, but the faithful will be rewarded. This balance between those that will be punished and those that will be rewarded is very typical in the Quran. So the context is not about Jesus, but about the warning to the Jews. That's why in these 3 verses that are in the middle, it starts with number 157 of the Surah Al-Nisa, which is the one that is more specific. And for the saying, so it continues with the same idea, but these 3 verses are like an explanation of this particular sin of saying we kill the Messiah. the son, the son of Mary, and then there's other explanations that we will see now. But then this next verse, God raised him up to himself, and in the third that he will be witness against the Jews in the day of resurrection, and then closes this subsection, and it starts again with for there, and then the whole unit finishes. So the context is about the warning to the Jews. Then there's two verses. The first one is the most important, is this one. And for this saying, we killed the Messiah, Jesus, son of Mary, the apostle of God. And they did not kill him nor crucify him, but it or he, both possibilities are possible with the looking at the verb. There's no name, but is according to the verb is the third person singular masculine. Was similar or was doubtful, and we will discuss this further. The main problem is here is in subiha. Subiha is the verb. Oops, sorry. I think touching the screen has been problematic. Oh, I don't know why it closed, but just 1 minute. So, but the verb shubiha is the main problem. Now I have it here again. Let's share again. So we will explain a little bit more, a lot about what is the real meaning of shubiha, because normally it is translated as similar, but can be also doubtful. Indeed, those who differ concerning him or it are in doubt about him or it. They do not have any knowledge of that beyond following conjectures, and they did not kill him, certainly. I also transliterated this of the original, Wama kataluhu yakinan, because we will discuss also the meaning of this last part. And then the next verse is just rather Allah raised him to himself, and Allah is almighty, all-wise. So the popular interpretation that we find in many translations is they take it or he was similar, or let's lower to right, I like it. It or he was similar, more in particular, he was similar, and who was he? So someone resembled Jesus and was crucified in his place. This is the popular interpretation that if you explain, you talk with Muslims, they most of them believe that someone was killed instead of Jesus, and that he received the face of Jesus, and then they took him and they crucified him. Who? These stories explain that it was an apostle that volunteered. Another says that was Judah, that was a punishment. There's another one that says that all the apostles suddenly resembled Jesus, and then they pick up one and they crucify him. So this is the interpretation that is more extended. There are problems to this substitution theory. One side, if the apostles saw what happened, why did they not write another story in the Gospels? But more than that, God deceived generations of Romans, Christians, and Jews for 6 centuries. It doesn't fit with the idea of God in the Quran to deceive generations of people. Why no hadith reports a commentary of Muhammad on such an extraordinary claim? Today I was talking to someone who is living in Nablus, and he's going to this university to study the Quranic studies, and now he's starting with the hadith. And he told me for him, this argument is very important. There's no hadith, so no tradition from Muhammad in the, let's say, 40,000, 50,000 traditions that are in the main collections of hadith of the traditions in the Sunnah that reports any commentary of Muhammad of this claim. This is really extraordinary, because if he really thought that the meaning of what he was saying is that Jesus didn't die on the cross, for sure there would be something else. Then the entire theory hangs on a few words, which is not clear at all. And it seems that it changed the order in the last moment. The explanation stories do not come from the prophet, come from other places, but not from a Islamic background. So this is the introduction, the summary of tafsir explanations of the exegesis of the Quran in the early centuries, and then other more recent. I divided in exegesis that deny Jesus' death and others that are compatible with Jesus' real death. There are not really many that defend that Jesus died, but the explanations they give are compatible with the real death. Exegesis that deny Jesus' death is a very brief summary. So the substitution legends is the one that are more extant now. They started more or less the first half of the 8th century. In particular, this Wab ibn Munabi, that he proposes two explanations with the substitution legend. John Damason is probably one of the first Christians that speaks about Islam. And he considered that Islam is a heresy of the Christians. And then he writes about it. But at a certain point, he says that the Quran cannot be true because it says that Jesus didn't die on the cross. So he was given the same interpretation. Perhaps he heard this interpretation from Muslim scholars, but the fact is that he is saying exactly the same, but he uses this like to accuse the Quran of not being true. And then Al-Tabari is 2 centuries later, but he has the virtue that, as he has done with all the Quran, in this particular verse, he lists 11 previous tafsirs, interpretations or exegeses, with stories about how Jesus escaped from death. But these are the exegeses that deny Jesus' death. Then, compatible with his real death, first of all, the Ismaili Shia tradition is very common between the Shia and specifically the group of the Ismaili to accept the real death of Jesus, not because they defend it, but because it fits with their understanding of the Quran. One example is Abu Hatim al-Razi, and he says, well, he accepts the physical death while denying the killing of the soul. So for them, this they didn't kill him means that they didn't kill the soul, they kill only the body. And this fits very well with the Quran when the Quran says that martyrs don't die. Never think of those martyred in the cause of Allah as death. In fact, they are alive with the Lord. So they consider that physically he died, but he is is a martyr and for the cause of Allah, and he is not dead. He is alive with the Lord. Against the substitution specifically, this is a little bit later. He died in 1200. Fakr al-Din al-Razi. This is Sunni, and he was a scholar of different disciplines, from mathematics to medicine to astronomy, and he was very rational. He said, but when he studied this, he said, changing the likeness of a person would destroy social order. It cannot be. It could make the marriage not valid, or could be impossible to do any kind of historical science. So he goes exactly directly against this substitution theory. Recent interpretations suggest three parts of the possible um, main ways of interpreting. One is that Jesus' death is coherent with God's characterization in the Quran. I wrote here the Quranic paradigm of God's rejection and vindication by David Marshall. It was in 1996. David Marshall also helped me a lot. He was the editor for this article, and he was also sharing ideas, and we were working together, and I'm very grateful to him. But he says the paradigm that we find in the Quran, that the evildoers gets the God's rejection and then vindication, we can find also that the evildoers, the Jews that said we killed Messiah, that the God's rejection of this killing and vindication, that he will be the judge or testimony against them in the day of the resurrection. And then another similar idea is from Fortune, is more recent. The essence is the same. God rescues Jesus before death for in a Muslim perspective, or after in a Christian perspective. But at the end is the same. Then the Islamic theology approaches, I put here two that are interesting, from different scholars. One is from Ayub. He wrote in 1980, I think it's the second article, but two articles in the Muslim world, that both of them have the name of towards a Muslim Christology. So it's about Jesus Christ, but from a Muslim perspective. And then he said first that God would not deceive humanity for centuries, but then he says they did not kill him is not a historical but a theological statement. And he means by that Jesus in the Quran is the word of God. And when they say they did not kill him, it's saying they cannot kill the word of God. It's impossible to kill the word of God. This is his way of understanding. And the other is Roberts. She has a Christian background, but then became Muslim. And she has the idea of Jesus, that he was not killed against his will, but he accepted the crucifixion and the death as an act of surrender. And she says, this is the most Islamic act, to surrender. Islam is surrender. And then she opens also to a Muslim theology of atonement that, well, we cannot here explain more, but it's something that the Shia Islam has developed more, especially with the blood of martyrs, has a particular power. And then the last one is to take shubha as the uncertainty, incompatible with the substitution theories. They were perplexed. It's a very old article, 1 century ago, from Elder, and he said that shubha should be understood. They were perplexed, not that someone else was similar. And then this other similar of Oakes. Oakes is the one who wrote also a monography, but 10 years ago, he also wrote an article explaining this, that he has found the registers in dictionaries of the same root as uncertainty, not just as likeness. Then we go to these three grammatical issues. One of them is very simple, is they did not kill him nor crucify it. Active voice, not passive. The Jews did not kill him is not the same as he was not killed. Being inactive can be just denying the actor. But then who killed them? Who killed him, sorry. So the first idea could be a reference to the Romans. And I must say that this is the first thing that came to my mind when I studied this. At the end, someone helped me was convincing that it cannot be, but it looks like it could be, because according to the Gospels and also to historians like Flavius Josephus and others, the Romans were not mere executors. Pilate condemned him to death. He was not doing the desire, the will of the Jews in many other things. He was against the desires of the Jews in many other things. He could also say, no, I don't see that he is guilty, so I don't crucify him. But he did. And especially the historians who are Roman historians, when they say something about Jesus, they say that he was condemned by Pilate and was killed, was executed. But and what convinced me that it cannot be is that the horizon of the Quran is very far from the Romans of the time of Jesus. They are not mentioned at all. I put here that, in fact, there is one surah that is called Al-Rum, but it's the Byzantines, not the Romans. Al-Rum, but it's called like this because it mentions a battle that the Byzantines lost in the time of Muhammad. But Al-Rum is the way of saying the Byzantines. In fact, here, for example, when we call among Christians, when we in Arabic we say the Rum are the Orthodox, and there is also the Roman Catholic that are those that has the Byzantine rite, but they are Catholic. So Rome is not Rome; is the second Rome when Rome was brought to Constantinople. So they don't mention at all the Romans. In the time of Jesus, when he speaks to the people in the Quran, he's speaking to Jews always, not to Romans. So it doesn't seem that the Quran is saying anything about the Romans. So the questions of the possible agent remains still unsolved. Shubbiha, resemble or was doubtful. It or he was shubbiha for them. I think this is very important for understanding that the the theories or this explanations of the substitution doesn't hold. The root shin ba ha in the verbal form one means to resemble, to be similar, to look like. Those that know how the Semitic languages work know that the roots normally are 3 letters, can be more or less, but normally are 3. And they can use different forms of verbs like conjugations, but they can use form 1 or 2 or 3. There are several. And there's a change of meaning when they use one or the other. And the thing is that normally there are very few roots that are used in more than 2 or 3 or 4 conjugations. Normally there is 1 or 2 only. And sometimes it happens like with this, apparently, because the form 1 appears many times, and it means to resemble or to be similar, to look like. But shubbiha follows form 2 in the passive voice. And form 2 can change a little bit the meaning. The problem is that it's not used very frequently. The verbal form 1 is very much used, very frequently. So when someone sees a word with this root, thinks about what he has been using, that this means to resemble, to be similar, to look like. But shubbiha, the second form, has another meaning. How can we know? Well, we can go to the Quran and we don't find this word in the Quran, only in this particular sentence. So the closest texts to the Quran are the ones that are recorded in the Sunnah. The Sunnah, all the hadith, there are not many also. There is very uncommon, but at least there are 2 hadith that use exactly the same word. One is this. Aisha, when Muhammad died, Aisha was the youngest wife of Muhammad, reported that the Messenger of Allah was shrouded in 3 cotton garments. And she gives more details, and so far as hula, another garment, is concerned, there were doubts for the people if it was brought for him in order to shroud him with it, but it was abandoned. So there were doubts for the people. Shubiha ala nas, and nas is Shubiha is doubt. And this is the translation that Sunnah.com is giving because it's what corresponds. So it indicates a doubt about what was the correct action. The second hadith that uses should be is both legal and illegal things are obvious. And in between, there are doubtful matters. So whoever forsakes what is doubtful to him, lest he may commit a sin, will definitely avoid what is clearly illegal. So there are things that are legal, things that are illegal, and in the middle, there are things that are doubtful, meaning uncertain from a legal point of view. So if someone avoids these things, he's in the safe side always. So here it carries the meaning of a legal uncertainty. So putting both together is like is a doubt about what is correct to do. Then in the verse that we are analyzing, it should be also translated that it was dubious if the crucifixion was right or not. What was the action that if is about the action? So it's a doubt about the action. So in less words, it could be it was morally dubious if the action was good or not. And then the third grammatical issue is the last words of the verse. Wama katalu yakinan. And no, they kill him with certainty. So the translation is frequently this, and certainly they did not kill him. It's like saying you said at the beginning of the verse, and they didn't kill him, and it finished, and certainly they did not kill him. But for this translation, the natural order of the words would be wayakinan ma kataluhu, no wama kataluhu yakinan. So the actual order of the verse with this order, that is the one of the Quran, should be, and they did not kill him with certainty. So it's not applied to the objective fact, but to the state of mind. So they were not certain in killing him. Can be yakinan applied to this uncertainty in mind? Well, we have this example also from the Sunnah. The Prophet hears the call to prayer and he says, whoever says the same as these, the call to prayer, with certainty, with sincerity, there are 2 or 3 hadith that are very similar and they translate the same word, but with a small difference, yakinan, he will enter paradise. So here yakinan is applied to how the person says the words, not to the fact of going to paradise. Then with all these things, the second part of the verse 157 of Surah 4 is all about uncertainty and doubts about the responsibility of the Jews. Nor did they crucify him, but it was morally dubious for them. Indeed, those who differ concerning it are surely in doubt about it. They do not have any knowledge of that beyond following conjectures, and they did not kill him with certainty. The question now is where all these doubts come from. Jewish-Christian polemics in the background. First, well, Christians, even from the beginning, if we go to the Acts of the Apostles after Pentecost, Peter is accusing those that were in front of him of killing Jesus. But then after some pages, the apostles were caught by the Sanhedrin, and they said, you are talking about this Jesus and you are blaming us of his death. So this is from the beginning. But I took another example is of the early Christian polemics is against Jews by Justin Martyr. He is from Nablus, but he was in Rome, and he writes this dialogue with Tryphon, in which he several times he says that Jews crucified Jesus. Here I draw one in which is a language that is clearly in confrontation. To be idolaters and murderers of righteous men, and then saying that they killed Jesus. And also another moment that then also during the Passover you crucify him. So it's accusing Jews of killing him unjustly. What the Jews did? Well, they said, well, we killed him, but it was a sentence of death, and it was just the application of this. In fact, in the Sanhedrin Tractate, a legal text of the Talmud, we find this braita that can be more or less from the year 220, according to the experts. A Baraita, this is a old tradition that is not in the Mishnah. So the Sanhedrin has a structure. There's the seven books of the Mishnah. The Mishnah is like the oral law that came from Moses, that they put in writing in the second, third century. But then there were other traditions that were old, and that also they included this in the Talmud. And then with all this, there are commentaries of the different rabbis of the moment and rabbis later that comment the commentaries, etc. So the Baraita is not part of the Mishnah, but is part of the Talmud. On the eve of Passover, Yeshu is the way they talk about Jesus, was hanged. For 40 days before the execution took place, a herald went forth and cried, "He is going forth to be stoned because he has practiced sorcery and enticed Israel to apostasy. Anyone who can say anything in his favor, let him come forward and plead on his behalf." But since nothing was brought forward in his favor, he was hanged on the eve of the Passover. So the main thing is, it was the execution, the legal execution of someone who has been condemned to death. The things that are underlined here, 40 days before, and nothing was brought forward in his favor, is like stressing that it was legal. In fact, there's one rabbi in the commentaries that says, but why he was given these 40 days? And then someone that answers, because he had connections with the civil power. So it means that in the mind of the Talmud, Jesus had connections with the Romans. They didn't want to kill him. Well, but then this strange, what is in bold letters, hanged, stoned, and hanged. So he was hanged or he was stoned. Stoning was the type of death penalty corresponding to a sorcerer, so practice sorcery, and to one who misleads others to apostasy, entice Israel to apostasy. So it's exactly what it corresponds. But then the Deuteronomy establishes that after the execution, the corpse must be hanged for a short time for public display. And this hanged is literally hang him on a wood or hang him on a tree, because the wood and tree is the same word. So that explains that he was killed by stoning and then hanged. But it's curious that when it says hanged, is always saying on the eve of Passover or on the eve of Passover, saying, well, it was for a short time because it was the eve of Passover, so he had to be hanged for a short time before starting Passover. But I think this explains the hanged and stoned. But if we understand also this hanging, hang him on a wood, as crucifixion, then it matches the order of the Quran, which is also strange because it says they did not kill him nor crucify him. So considering crucifixion as hanging on the wood, it's the same order. First they kill him, then they crucify him, so they hang him on the wood. And the third idea of these polemics is that these polemics really arrived to Muhammad, even if we're from centuries. But there's one moment in the Sirat Rasulullah, so the first biography about Muhammad, for probably 100 years after his death, probably because we have the edition that was done 200 years later or 100 years more, but probably was closer. So the delegation of Christians come from Najran to visit the Prophet. And then the Prophet recites a section of the Surah Al-Imran, which is a different one, is number 3. But then Ibn Ishaq, the author, reproduces the verses with his own interpretations. The living, the ever-existent. And then he says, the living who cannot die, whereas Jesus died and was crucified according to their doctrine. So Christians are wrong because they say that Jesus is God and that he died. He cannot die. But also we see the same order. Jesus died and was crucified according to their doctrine. So it matches what the Talmud says. Then it tells them, the Christians, refuting what they assert of the Jews in regard to his crucifixion. So what comes later is to refute what they say, the Christians say about the Jews, and how he took up and purified him from them, the Jews, and said, when God said, "O Jesus, I am about to cause thee to die and to exalt thee to myself and to purify thee from those who disbelieve." This is from the same Surah 4, Al-Imran. Then Christians claim that the Jews crucified Jesus is denied because I am about you to cause you to die, because God caused his death, which is compatible with a real death and a real crucifixion, but just that the one who did it was God. Then, so in summary of this that we have seen, this polemic is in the background. The Christians accuse the Jews of an unjust crucifixion. The Talmud assumes the legal responsibility, and the Quran responds to Jewish-Christian polemics, not absolving, not condemning, but saying they do not know in this second part of the verse. But the solution is that God caused Jesus' death. So we now can say, if the Jews didn't kill him, who killed him? God was the only one who can cause death. And that's what we are going to see in other relevant Quranic verses. First, he is the only one that can give or take life. The Quran affirms this is only God. My Lord is the only one who has power to give life and to cause death in the mouth of Abraham. Then he is the one, again, who gives life and causes death. He's the only one who can cause death. And it's a practical verse in which we find this applied to the first battle that Muhammad won with his companions, the Battle of Badr. In the Battle of Badr, after the battle, they are told, you did not kill them, rather it was God who killed them. And you did not throw when you threw, rather it was God who threw. So he's not denying the killings, and he's not denying that they throw. It's saying, you did not throw when you threw. So it looks like a contradiction, but no, he's saying that God is the only one that gives life and that takes life. So the ultimate case of the death of the believers is God. If we apply this to our verse, we find they did not kill him nor crucify him. Then the discussion about the doubt. God raised him up towards himself, who caused his death. And God is almighty, all-wise. So there's no denial of Jesus' actual crucifixion and death. Rather, they claim that it was God's action because he's all-powerful. He knows also who is responsible. And then the other three mentions of Jesus' death in the rest of the Quran. One is the one that we just saw. I am going to cause you die. The verb to cause you die is tawafa. And this verb is referred 25 times in the Quran. This argument I borrowed from Reynolds, that I saw that I watched also his presentation in one of these seminars this year. But he explains in an article that this verb is always translated as to cause to die. Here is another, in the Surah 5, we find that Jesus from paradise is saying, when you cause me to die. But many times it's translated, when you took me up. But the verb is always tawafa in this case and in the other case. And also in the other case, sometimes it's translated, I am going to took you up. Why? In the other 23 times, it's translated that God is causing you to die, in like taking your soul from your body, causing the death. But in these two, they translate in another way to try to keep the interpretation of the Surah 4:157, because if you try to say that there the death of Jesus is denied, you cannot say that here is talking about his death. And then there is this one, peace be upon me, the day I was born, the day I will die, and the day I will be raised back to life. So here is also talking about the day I will die. And we can see that it's completely parallel to a few verses before, which is about John the Baptist, and the Quran says that peace be upon him, the day he was born, and the day he will die, and the day he will be raised back to life. So the raising back to life can refer here or here to the last day, the final resurrection, and the day I will die to the natural death. The words in Arabic are the same, so there's no the only difference is that the verb is in the first person or in the third person. What those that defend that in the Quran 4:157 it's denying the death of Jesus, they say, well, he has to die, but now he's in heaven, in paradise, and then he will come back, and then he will continue living a normal life, and then he will die, and then the last day everybody will rise from the death. So, but it's trying to explain, to make it compatible with the precedent verse that is considered that he didn't die. But if you just understand that it's not denying the death of Jesus, then you can use the normal meaning of the words directly. Conclusion. So the correct reading of the Quran 104, 157, 158 would be, and for this saying, we killed the Messiah, Jesus, son of Mary, the apostle of God. Though they did not kill him, nor did they crucify him, God took his soul. But it was morally dubious for them. Indeed, those who differ concerning it, Christians and Jews, are surely in doubt about it. They do not have any knowledge of that beyond following conjectures, and they did not kill him with certainty. Indeed, God raised him up towards himself, and God is almighty. Only he can take life, and always he knows who is responsible. In this reading, the crucifixion and death of Jesus is not denied, but attributed to God's decree. There's a hint to the polemics between Jews and Christians about the guilt. The controversies are surpassed by God's knowledge and power. And then as consequences, I wrote just, the Quran does not deny the death of Jesus. The Quran can stand the historical truth against John Damascen's accusation. It explains why there is no hadith about this issue. The substitution legends are unnecessary. These are legends that has very strange origins. Jesus died surrendering to God's decree, and this fits with the Quranic belief. And Muslim faith in Jesus as a human prophet is not altered. It's not that accepting the death of Jesus by crucifixion, they have to accept the Christian faith. It's different. What the Quran says and the Christian faith is different. And it's not necessary to alter everything, just this point. But not denying Jesus' death removes an important obstacle for mutual understanding between Muslims and Christians. This is the biography that I have mentioned. I'm not going through this, but if it's recorded, you can go to it later. And so I have finished.